welcome to 5 Minutes with Bo Hanson. This video, we're going to be talking about what I call environmental impact. And one of the key things that we often talk about when we try to describe what we do as a job, we talk about the fact that we're what you call behavioralists. And the philosophy behind being a behavioralist is the fact that we believe that if we alter the environment, that we also alter the behaviors that emerge from within it. And in many ways, I like to think about, as coaches, we do control the environment. You can think about environment as being not just the facilities that you operate in. To a degree, you control what facilities they are, but also the equipment that you use. And more importantly, the environment that you create around your culture. And as a coach, your coaching style influences your team's culture and the behaviors that emerge from it. And so we often talk to coaches who will say that their players don't communicate, or we don't have trust in our team, or we'd have zero accountability, or no one on the team holds each other accountable and gives feedback to one another. My response to the coaches is simply, what if this was true? And just imagine for a fact that this is 100% true. It may not be, but just pretend that it is. That you are somehow responsible for creating those behaviors. I believe it's healthy for a coach to think that way. And I'm not talking about what is true or what is not true. I'm saying, is it useful to consider that you have such an impact over the environment that you create that it's entirely possible that those behaviors that you're seeing emerging from that environment are a function of what you've allowed to occur within that environment. And so if I was to describe, for example, a farmer, and a farmer, they plant their seeds at a particular time of the year. The seed's primary job is to grow into a vegetable or a plant that we can eat and harvest. Under what conditions will those seeds not grow? Human beings are exactly the same. We have to think about ourselves as coaches, as farmers, and that we have to create an environment where people can grow. And we're pre-designed to do that. You know, it's our destiny to improve. We need to do that. We have an inbuilt need to actually get better. But we won't under certain conditions. And so it's critical that we start thinking about the type of environment that we want to create. And so rather than thinking about this in terms of telling an athlete that they have to be accountable, create an environment where accountability has to happen. So what would that look like? What would be an environment where accountability must occur? Under what conditions, if we're looking at trust, under what conditions within the environment would trust be the obvious outcome? We can probably think of some conditions that would disable trust. For example, if athletes were not confidential with what they were told by fellow team members, if coaches weren't confidential, perhaps there'd be a lack of trust if no one was allowed to get to know anyone else. So that could be simple as we really focused on getting a great result, we train really hard, but we don't allow any time for social interaction. Well, if people don't understand each other, then trust can't possibly develop. And hence the reason why if coaches partake in team development activities, they go out to lunch together, they might have dinner together, they just spend time together. Trust is natural in its development. Okay. So what constitutes a high-performance environment? It's a question that I'm often asked. And I recently did a podcast where I answered this question. And one thing you'll never hear me talk about when we talk about a high-performance environment is the quality of the facilities, because a lot of environments can look like a high-performance environment, but we mainly refer to the quality of the people behaviors that emerge from that environment. Teams that we've seen be highly successful, that is win national championships or world championships or Olympic medals, they have an environment where the behaviors of trust, they have accountability, they give feedback to each other, and they have total ownership over their performance. And so again, we start thinking about, right, well, what are some mechanisms, what are some systems that we have to have in place within our environment to make them happen? So I have a lot of these answers. I don't give them away for free as such, but if you look on our website, you'll find a number of mechanisms which can drive, for example, accountability. You know, how do you help an athlete have an accountability conversation? We may want all of our players to hold each other accountable, but from my experience, most young people don't know how to do that. Most older people don't know how to do that. It's uncomfortable. It's not unsafe to do it, but it is uncomfortable. But the key way we talk about is noticing the behavior, checking in if people are okay, and asking how you can help. And we'll role play that scenario and that situation so that athletes can learn how to do it effectively. And what they learn is that when you're willing to engage in that conversation, it doesn't diminish trust, it actually builds it, because the only reason you would have that conversation is because you truly care. And so environments where there's a lot of a care factor, and that real care and concern and that willingness to give and receive feedback from each other, is typically an environment which also drives that accountability. And so I'd like you to think about the environment that you create and check in and see whether you do have accountability. Do you have athletes upholding the standards of behaviour that you've set as a program? You know, do you have people giving feedback to each other? Are you open to feedback as a coach? Now that alone will completely destroy any chance of feedback coming from your players if you're not interested in it as well. You know, do you allow your players to take ownership? You know, we have programs whereby the athletes have a say in what program we run today, what exercises, what drills do we do today, when we review our game from the weekend, what aspects of it do we need to improve, and what are some exercises that can help us get there? Because when you allow that to happen, the athletes naturally engage in that because they want to do well for you. And so check in with yourself, check in with the culture that you've created, and ask yourself that question. You know, is this the type of environment which is going to enable growth?